Welcome everyone to the October Ordinary Meeting of Norfolk Island Regional Council. I'll start the meeting by requesting everyone to be upstanding while the General Manager recites the Statement of Respect.
The Norfolk Island Regional Council promotes a climate of respect for all. We will endeavour to inspire in our community shared civic pride by valuing and protecting our unique culture and environment, both natural and built, for the current and future generations. We, the Interim Administrator and staff of the Norfolk Island Regional Council, undertake to act with honesty and integrity, to conduct ourselves in a way that engenders trust and confidence in the decisions we make and the actions we take on behalf of the Norfolk Island community. We acknowledge the Norfolk Island people, the traditional custodians of this island.
Thank you, and I ask everyone to remain standing while I read the list of condolences. Peter Stanley Napton, who died on the 14th of September. Elizabeth Gow, who died on the 12th of September. And Peter Summerscales, who died on the 28th of September. And I ask that we remain silent for a moment of respect. Thank you. You may be seated. And I'll just ask you to note that the funeral of Peter Summerscales is expected to pass by the chamber at 3 p.m. So if the meeting is still in progress at 3 p.m, we will go into a short period of recess out of respect while we observe the funeral procession passing outside, and then return to the remainder of the meeting. Mr. General Manager, are there any apologies for the record?
No.
Just an apology from myself in terms of me attending this meeting again remotely. I apologise that it's necessary to do that, and it's the result directly of restrictions on movement from mainland through Sydney out to Norfolk Island. And hopefully by the November council meeting, we'll be back into an arrangement whereby I'm able to attend on island for 1 week of each month. Mr. General Manager, are there any disclosures of interest?
No, there is not.
No disclosures. Then I'll move to item 5.1, which is the minutes of the council meeting held on the 1st of September 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. The minutes before you for the meeting held 1st of September are presented and are in accordance with what transpired that day. There will probably be, I suggest, one amendment, which is under 2 of Statement of Respect. I did say last meeting the Administrator. I didn't call you the Interim Administrator, so I would probably amend that record at item 2 within the minute.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. With that amendment to the minutes, I resolve that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 1st of September 2021 be received, taken as read and confirmed. And I will move to item 6. Item 6 is public access. I understand there are no requests. Is that correct, Mr. General Manager?
Yes, Mr. Administrator.
And there is no administrator's minute or interim administrator's minute, and no reports from committees. So that brings us to item 9. Item 9.1 is the update on Council's advisory committees, resulting from the external audit findings numbers 1 and 2. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. Before you is a report recommending a appointment of 3 committees. They being the Business Innovation and Tourism Advisory Committee and the Sustainable Advisory Committee, and the Reserves and Conservations Advisory Committee. Those three committees are presented to you following a process that we undertook once you passed the resolution back in June, 9th of June of this year. And we called expressions of interest, and we had a selection panel and a process that we went through. And today we're now recommending 6 members on each committee. I'll pass to my colleagues to give you a rundown on each of the committees. But in essence, we're recommending that we put these 3 committees in place. The 4th committee, which is the Youth Advisory Committee, unfortunately we didn't receive any expressions of interest during the period, and that could be twofold, becoming the end of a school term. So we thought it would be best to hold that over until January 22. At that point, the school will be aligned to a new delivery model through Queensland, and there will probably be changes in staff and principals and the like. So we thought it would be best to wait till then and then see what we have for the new year and take the expression of interest for a Youth Advisory Committee at that point. Now, a final point before I head across to Manager of Environment and Planning is whoever you appoint to these committees today, there'll be a full induction program that we'll be delivering to each of the committee members so that each of the members are aware of council meeting policies and the procedures, council's code of conduct, and just general governance processes. So it's important that whoever does come onto the committee, they understand our processes that we will be having in place. So I'll just hand across to the Manager of Planning and Environment now, and he'll just give you a rundown on his 2 committees.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. So in my accountability area for council, we propose to form 2 advisory committees, the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Reserves and Conservation Advisory Committee. With regards to the Sustainability Advisory Committee, this is a committee that's aimed at working on the number of issues that there are facing the island regarding waste management, water management, both in terms of water quality and water security. It also includes topics such as food security, energy efficiency, and sustainable population. We have 6 proposed members of the Sustainability Advisory Committee covering a range of sectors, and I'll just go through each of those proposed members individually. They include Rebecca Gupta, representing agriculture, Natalie Groove as a community representative, Kath King as a business representative, Karen Harrington in education, Fred Howe as a community representative, and Jeff Edwards, a community science representative. Going on to the Reserves and Conservation Advisory Committee, this committee is concerned more around the management of Norfolk Island's public reserves, but also matters concerning biodiversity conservation and other land management matters. And so we have another 6 members, and they include both community members and representatives from other government agencies. I'll go through those individually. We have Margaret Christian, a community representative, George Parsons, an agricultural representative, Matt Reeves, another community representative, Nigel Greenup from Parks Australia in the Norfolk Island National Parks capacity, James Castles, Parks Australia, alternatively from Marine Parks, and the Director of the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications, or a delegate thereof as part of that committee. And then I'll hand to the Manager of Economic Development for the BTAC.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you. The BITAC is the Business Innovation and Tourism Advisory Committee, and its aim is to provide to assist Council in building a diverse and sustainable Norfolk Island economy. We'll be looking at the community strategic plan, operational plan, projects that fall out of those plans, and trying to look at innovative business solutions so that we can drive business growth within the community. We have 6 members and we had quite a strong group of expressions of interest. We have 6 members that we've recommended for the committee. Wayne Bedford, who represents tourism, has multiple businesses across the island. Matt Bigg from Big Farm, agricultural representative. Linda Halcombe represents retail operations across the island. Bart Murray, who represents both tourism and freight operations. Emily Reeves, agriculture and tourism. And Dale Parker is the elected representative or preferred representative from the Business Council of Norfolk Island, which will give us a more diverse range of businesses who can provide advice to the group.
Thank you, Ms McFeeters. I accept that there has been a proper process followed here, that expressions of interest were called for positions on the respective committees after Council determined a committee structure, that applications were sought from members of the community who were required to present their credentials, and that there was a selection process around selecting the most suitable candidates to hold these positions. The committees I'm proposing to establish membership of the committees for a period of up to 2 years or until a further council decision. So depending on whether council remains under administration or goes back to an elected council situation, these people that we're about to appoint today will hold their positions on the committee until there is a further decision of council. So if we go back to an elected council, that elected council may then determine what its position is on the membership of these committees. The committees are being established to provide community input directly into council decision making. Initially, that is into my decision making as the governing body. And beyond that, if within the 2 years an elected council is returned, the committees will remain in place, still able to provide community advice into council decision making until an elected council makes a further decision about the composition of the committees. So I resolve that this update on council's advisory committees be noted. 2, that subject to their attending the Norfolk Island Regional Council Advisory Committee member inductions and committing to compliance with Council's Code of Conduct and Code of Meeting Practice, Council formally appoints the people listed in this report as members of the respective advisory committees for a period of 2 years or until further decision of Council. And 3, that the Youth Advisory Committee be re-advertised at the end of January 2022. And I will move now to item 9.2, which is a report on membership of the Local Government Association of Queensland. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. It's pleasing that I get to present this so quickly back to you, given the decision was only made previous month, the 1st of September, to apply to the LGAQ. They have responded very quickly. They have been extremely welcoming of council. I've had several meetings with them in Brisbane where they've taken me through the processes that we will have access to if you decide to become a member of the LGAQ. Any decision that you make today is still contingent on their formal board approval, which will occur in late October. But some of the pleasing aspects that we'll see from this, thinking forward, not just from your point of view as an interim administrator, but if an elected body was to return, there's a much higher level of support placed there for members, which includes in the report an unlimited access to the association members portal. So unlike some of the things that happen in New South Wales, which is more an advocacy body, this organisation spends a lot of time face to face with its members, its elected members, and they've already indicated that should we become a member, they would include us in their what's called elected member update, which is EMU. They travel around every council that it's members, and they meet with them annually to walk each of the elected members through updates. So that's a pretty significant change from our previous thing. But in particular, we'll have an awful lot of targeted advocacy and also media support through this process. So I put to you today, Mr. Administrator, Interim Administrator, that we do join, and the membership fee has been set at $19,577, which will be prorated according to when we actually become a member within the LGAQ.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. We've already discussed the desirability or otherwise of Council's participation as a member of LGAQ at an earlier Council meeting. We've made our application and we have been invited to join subject to ratification by a board decision at LGAQ. So I will resolve that Council accept the LGAQ invitation to become an associate member and continue to work with them during any transitional opportunities with the Queensland Government's MOU with the Commonwealth. And I'll move now to item 9.3, which is a report on the scorecard on implementation of the external audit findings as at 30th of September 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Interim Administrator. The report that you see today shows it's a follow-on from a commitment that staff have made to you back in 24th of February of this year, where a scorecard will be reported quarterly. Before you today is an update of how we're tracking for 75 of the 113 EAFs that were assessed to be in the short term, which is the first 12 months. As at 30 September, 55% of the EAFs are reported as in progress, 24% are complete, and 21% are yet to be commenced. We've had a pretty tough month of finalising outcomes of the public inquiry, tough quarter, finalising the outcomes of the public inquiry and follow-up reports and submissions and the like. So it's distracted from our framework that we've put in place to continue this change program. But now that that's behind us, we're hoping to get back on and have the 75 completed by February next year. So before you, just an update report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. I have noted that there are a number of items there that are flagged using your traffic signals as red items, but I also accept that there has been an enormous distraction in terms of senior council staff time that was necessary to be devoted to responding to the requirements of the public inquiry. So I think as time goes by, these reports will start to make more sense as you start to be able to deliver the requirements from each of those external audit findings. So at this stage, I'm happy to note the progress, and I resolve that Council notes the progress of implementation of the 75 short to medium term EAFs as at 30th of September 2021. And I will move on to item 10.1, which is a report from the Manager, Corporate and Finance on Council's investments. Mr. General Manager. Thanks.
I'm leading this report today as the Manager, Corporate Finance is away on annual leave at present. Before you is a report that highlights we have 6.8 million investments in the bank, of which 4 million, a tad over 4 million is restricted cash, and there's an amount of money held at 627 in trust funds, and unrestricted cash. Externally restricted funds are at 891,000. The projected cash position for 30 June 22 is 4.9 million. Happy to take any questions.
I don't have any questions on that. The figure that I'm particularly interested in is the projected unrestricted cash balance at June 2022. And my understanding is that the estimate of what that position will be relies on council achieving its projected budget position, and that there'll be a $497,000 increase in the cash position over the current budget period, assuming that council adheres to its current budget. So I'm happy to note the investment report, and I resolve that council notes the investment report for August 2021, and I'll move to item 10.2, the corporate and finance update. Mr. General Manager.
Before you a report, a little bit more detailed report from the corporate finance team that focuses significantly on the external audit findings that they've been working on for the last quarter. In particular, there's significant work that's been done around the fixed asset register with some good quality outcomes coming from that. That's given us a much stronger figure around our depreciation. There's a bit of an update around our dashboarding and work within Civica using a product called Biz, which is a reporting tool, and I believe now that managers have now got access to Biz reports, which is improving their ability to see where their financial situation is across the organisation. There's an update there around audit and risk with some changes to the process for the 30th of June 21. I think I've got that right. Yeah, 30th of June 21 end of year, and we had some changes to some planning around that. There's an update there on the long-term financial plan work that we're doing, and also working on significant challenges around our IT systems that we're looking to change, and that's identified by the vast majority of challenges or EAS for this section of council. So happy to take any questions if you have any.
The IT challenges, can I take it that those challenges will be addressed as part of the work that you are proposing to engage an outside or an outside contractor to assist with and to provide advice on?
Yeah, so that they have been appointed and they've commenced work. They are about 3 weeks into the program, and there should be a report, an updated report coming to the November council meeting where they've identified significant savings and also significant improvements for the systems.
Thank you. And could I ask that when I'm next on Island, which we hope will be in early November, that some of these systems that you're introducing, particularly in the asset management area, that I be given a presentation and just be shown how what those systems contain and how they operate, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I resolve the council notes the information provided in the report, and I'll move to item 11.1, which is the tourism report for August 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. I'll just pass this across to a Manager of Economic Development to give you an update on these next two reports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Tourism report. We've just finalised the marketing plan, and we have some key programs and campaigns that are planned across television, print, digital media, with some trade visits as well. Some of the highlights of that campaign are the Australian Traveller, Holidays with Kids, which has over 750,000 families per quarter, and Signature Travel and Style. We'll be utilising both the print, digital and social media programs to promote Norfolk Island. The economic development.
Stop there.
Oh,
yeah. Super.
Thank you. Can I just ask, in terms of the marketing campaigns that are being proposed for 2021-2022, and their rollout. How is that being affected by the difficulty in getting, people being able to come to Ireland for their holidays? And are we just rolling out the marketing campaign, or are we targeting it in timeframes that link back to when people can actually travel and when they can't?
We're targeting based on encouraging travel when the lockdowns have finished or have relaxed, some of the restrictions have relaxed, and trying to encourage people to the site. So we've got an advertising campaign that we're currently working through with an external contractor, which will aim for the next 2 months up to December to be focused in the Brisbane and Queensland area, which is an area that is proactive at the moment. And then we've got a secondary campaign that will be rolling out from that December through to the first quarter, which will be focusing a lot more broadly on Victoria, New South Wales and Brisbane. The focus for the Queensland campaign is to hit the regional areas as well as the metropolitan to try and increase our reach at the moment and increase our visitation.
Okay, and this is probably crossing into another area of responsibility, so perhaps the GM might consider whether he wishes to respond to this. But could I get some sort of sense for when New South Wales emerges from its current lockdowns and Victoria emerges from their current lockdowns, what the impact will be in terms of flights being able to carry people to Norfolk Island, and people being able to get the passes to enter Norfolk Island once those lockdowns are lifted? What sort of restrictions will apply to travel?
I'll take that one, Mr. Administrator. There are regular emergency management team meetings. There's one again tomorrow morning to consider the next steps, but the airlines are already poised, awaiting decisions of when that will be raised and when travel will be allowed across the country. So New South Wales normally would receive 3 flights a week, and Qantas are ready to step back into that space as soon as travel restrictions are lifted. And we are also negotiating directly with Qantas for a direct Melbourne flight. And we've had a proven business case. It's been considered and received by Qantas, and they are certainly interested, but it's just all reflective on decisions around travel.
Right. So being a user of the airlines, I understand what happens, when you get on domestic flight, flying intra-state. You can do that without necessarily providing any evidence in relation to, your health status. That's on an intrastate basis. But for people leaving, say, New South Wales from Sydney to go to Norfolk Island, once the travel restrictions cease on the New South Wales people, what will be the implication in terms of their ability to go to Norfolk Island, to obtain a pass to get to Norfolk Island?
So this morning I received an email about a thing called a digital passenger declaration, which has been released by DESE, which I'm just trying to think of what department that is. And it's basically it's a digital passport to replace physical incoming passenger cards for travel declaration across Australia, and that will allow the DPD to capture the passenger vaccination information if that is a requirement of National Cabinet. So it's all dependent on National Cabinet. So that's only just hit my desk this morning, and we've already spoken with the departments, multiple, about how this would actually work.
Right. Because what I'm becoming curious about is it seems that we're going to be moving to a situation where particular areas are deemed to be areas of lockdown, and if people are applying for passes to enter Norfolk Island under the current system, if they come from an area that's been in lockdown, then they may not be eligible for a pass. But when that system ceases under the 70 and 80% vaccination targets, I'm just curious to understand whether that gives an automatic right to go to Norfolk Island, or what sort of health requirements, public health order type requirements will be applied to people coming from Sydney now, for example, because I know people can already travel from Brisbane, but from Sydney it's all about to change, as I understand it.
Yeah, so at the moment, the state of emergency is still in play until the 31st of December. That was extended recently by the Island Administrator. And whilst that's still in play, that allows Council to continue the entry pass system, which is supervised by Norfolk Island Police. So that is the control point. But after 31st of December, once the state of emergency lifts, if that's the decision by Emergency Management, Norfolk Island, then we would have to rely upon travel pass systems from across Australia to work. So at the moment, our legislative framework is our state of emergency, which we can rely upon and control our border movement.
Right, and do I understand correctly that if we're relying on travel pass arrangements, those are largely to be linked to vaccination?
We don't at this stage, but what we're reading this morning from the digital pass system is that they are putting that in place to satisfy some of the premiers around Australia that require certification of vaccination.
Right. Okay. All right, I'll leave it at that. Just turn to your recommendation. So I resolve that the tourism report August 2021 be noted, and I'll move to item 11.2, which is the economic development section update. Mr. General Manager.
Just wait 1 second. No, we're on. Okay, sorry. Yes, thanks, Mr. Administrator. I'll ask the Manager of Economic Development to provide you a quick update of her report.
Thank you, Mr. General. August proved a challenging month for Norfolk Island, with the travel restrictions across Australia resulting in the suspension of the Australian-New Zealand bubble. We saw a consequent 50% drop in visitation to the island, and that was reflected across all of the economic development departments, both in visitation numbers but also in revenue streams, with the exception of the liquor bond, which performed quite well. In spite of that, we had a 24% increase on 2020, which is expected because 2020 was also impacted by COVID. But it was also a 7% increase on 2019 and a 14% on 2018 results. So tracking year to date, we're looking quite well, even though the August sales were slightly down. So we're hoping to continue that through the coming months.
Okay, well, we're all holding our breaths waiting for the COVID impacts to release their stranglehold that they have on economic activity. I resolve that Council note the information provided in this report, and I'll move to item 12.1, which is the services update. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. The short report here is just to provide a update on building maintenance and roads, particularly work around roundabout that when you do come back to Island, you'll see is now finalised, and all the traffic signs and footpaths are almost complete. And there's some work that's been carrying out around the electricity department, there was a bit of a software glitch last month with the battery where it caused a blackout, and that was purely because of software, and the generator didn't kick in as was planned. That's since been rectified with a visit from a Tesla battery person mainland last week, I believe. So happy to take any questions.
Just on that battery problem, did that put the battery out of operation?
No, it just it was the software. I might get these percentages wrong, but it was when the battery got to 25%, it should have started the generator at 20%, but it fell from 25% to 16%, and the generator hadn't kicked in. So it was a software glitch in there, and that was no fault of any staff or anybody here. It was just something that went wrong within the software of the battery, and we had a blackout, and I think staff had to manually come up and kick the generators in. So we believe that's all been fixed now, and it's been tested several times, but it's just that's the story. The percentages might not be right.
Can you enlighten me as to how long the blackout lasted?
About half an hour.
20 minutes.
20. Yeah, wasn't a long one.
Okay, relatively brief. All right, thank you. I resolve that council notes the information provided in the report, and I'll move now to item 13.1, the waste management update, EAF 27 and 28. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Administrator, I've just been informed that the funeral procession will be going past here at 2:45. So that's about 7 minutes away. Did you want to take a break now and resume at 2:50?
Yes, I think that would be sensible. So do we just leave the system running, or how do you propose that we handle this?
What we'll do is we will stop the recording of the meeting, and but we'll remain connected.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll return. I resolve that the meeting be adjourned and that it resume at 2:50.
Okay, we're off recording now.
You're off recording now, Mr. Administrator.
Okay, I will resume the meeting at 2:55 p.m. And we were up to item 13.1, which is a report on the waste management update, EAF 27 and 28. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Administrator. I'll ask the Manager of Planning and Environment to address this report.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Mr. Interim Administrator, the waste management update before you provides an update on Norfolk Island Regional Council's plans to cease the use of Headstone as a waste disposal facility and other waste management activities planned for the 21-22 operational plan. The first item I'll start with was some communication that we received from the Assistant Secretary of Marine Parks and Island Branch Parks Australia on the 9th of September regarding the requirement to cease the disposal of industrial and domestic waste at Headstone. In that communication, they did recognise the steps that Council have made to date, some substantial steps made to date around improving waste management on the island, and also the Interim Administrator's public statement in the July Council meeting, the need to end waste disposal into the ocean. They did point out that the disposal of industrial and domestic waste into the Norfolk Marine Park is prohibited under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Regulation, and made it clear that there is now a time-bound deadline for us to cease disposal of waste into the ocean. We're to cease that disposal by the 31st of January 2023 or sooner. And as a result of that, Council's now obliged to meet that deadline and to provide routine updates to Parks Australia on the progress of achieving that deadline, which we've commenced discussions with Parks Australia around how that reporting will work. So in terms of meeting that deadline, the activities that we're doing to cease disposal of waste at the Headstone Waste Disposal Facility, we have submitted a DA for the establishment of a waste processing area. That would be located within the portion of the airport in the area known as the drill ground, in close proximity to the existing waste management centre, and that area would be dedicated for the receival of waste types that are currently going to Headstone. So non-putrescible waste types, industrial and waste types that basically don't break down, inert type waste, and for that to be processed and either returned for recycling to the waste management centre or for it to be packaged up and taken off island. As well as that, we now have 2 proposals since the writing of this report for the updating of Council's waste management strategy and implementation plan. We went to 2 separate consultants to assist us with that work. We now have those proposals, but are yet to assess them appropriately, and that will be happening this week. And so that strategy would conduct a number of activities, including a review of various waste management technologies that we would seek to bring to island through acquisition of capital or through provision by the private sector. And that is the update for waste management for this report, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. General Manager, there's mention in the report of an application for funding from the Building Better Regions funding pool. And I noticed that you sent through an update to me yesterday. I just wonder, for the record, if you could explain to me where Council's application is up to, please.
Unfortunately, on this circumstance, Council's application for BBRF for circular economy has been rejected or unsuccessful, and we've made an appointment to receive some formal feedback, which is disappointing. So we now need to pursue a different avenue for funding for this area. I think it's quite critical, given that the Marine Parks has now served formal notice on me to close Headstone or all operations of ocean disposal needs to cease. That's just over 12 months away, yet we haven't got any funding mechanisms to manage that waste effectively, which has to come from purchasing of large processing equipment, which will be difficult to get to the island given our current freight situation. So we are running out of time, and disappointing as it is to not be successful in a grant application where we put enormous amount of time and effort into, including several visits by me to ministers on the mainland when I could travel, and receiving strong support for the work that we intended to do. We just need now to reinforce that, I suppose, between you and I. We need to reinforce with our own minister that we have this impending deadline that requires money to be spent.
Could I just add to that, Mr. General Manager? It's also been raised, Mr. Interim Administrator, that there is currently a national waste policy that's been developed by the Commonwealth Government, and recently there has been calls for applications for what's called the Recycling Modernisation Fund, which we've also investigated the opportunity for us to gain funding for, specifically for this kind of work. And unfortunately, the external territories we've been advised by the Department of Infrastructure are ineligible for that form of funding as well. So the 2 main forms of funding from the Commonwealth that we would be most suited for to receive funding for infrastructure to be able to manage this issue, we on one hand we're unsuccessful for, and on the other hand we're ineligible for. And to the best of our ability, we are unable to find other sources of government funding for that work.
Right. I understand we were told that our application didn't meet the guidelines for the funding. Are you able to elaborate on in what way that was the case? What
No,
was
that
that application that did not
at this
meet
stage-
those guidelines?
Yeah, at this stage, I don't know, Mr. Administrator. That's why I've made an appointment for a formal debriefing to see where we didn't meet the criteria.
Okay. So in the meantime, and I understand that we could do no more than this until we had installed the infrastructure that we needed to be able to process the waste. But in the meantime, my understanding is the plan is to stockpile the waste.
That's right.
In the vicinity of the airport.
Yes.
And so that would still remain our intention. It then becomes an issue as to what we need to do to be able to export it back to a process on the mainland.
That's the only option that we have unless we can be successful in obtaining grant money to acquire the plant and equipment to process.
Yep. Okay. All right. Look, I thank you for the report, and I resolve the council notes the information provided in the report, and I'll move to item 13.2, which is the planning and environment update. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Administrator, again, I'll pass to the Manager of Planning and Environment to provide an update.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Mr. Interim Administrator, on more positive notes, if I may just point out some highlights from what is our standard planning and environment update for the month of September. It's noted in the planning section that we have commenced two particular activities, in this case the review of the Norfolk Island Plan and separately the review of Development Control Plan 2 for water resources. Both of those processes have commenced through preliminary public exhibitions, or in the first case public consultation for the Norfolk Island Plan review, whereby there was a call for submissions from the community for the plan over August and September, and we've received a number of comments from the community on that plan. I should point out that we currently don't have any draft updates to the plan. The first step in the process was to call for submissions or for comments on the types of things that should be included in that. However, the scope for that plan is essentially to make a number of housekeeping updates to the plan, things that are well due for update, look at some of the zoning provisions, particularly for zoning close to the centre of town, the Burnt Pine area here. So we have received those submissions and we're now considering those before we prepare a draft of the updates. And separate to that, the water DCP has been exhibited for a period of 28 days. In fact, we called for submissions for a longer period than that, and we've received one submission to that draft DCP. So we'll be considering that over the same period before there is gazetted. Also in the planning section, after a long wait, we have put on public exhibition the DA for the Youngs Road Quarry, including an environmental impact statement. And that is on exhibition from the 24th of September to the 29th of October. So we'll be calling for comments, obviously, from communities and other stakeholders regarding that particular proposal. We look forward to seeing any comments that there are. Turning our mind to waste, and we, as you know, we're providing a routine update of both export of waste, and this may be the most complete version of waste that we are stockpiling, both containerised and uncontainerised, for the year so far. So today, without going into details, we've exported 61 tonnes of waste, but we do have a substantial amount of waste already stockpiled, both in containerised form and uncontainerised form, which totals around 315 tonnes, so no small amount of waste. And the reason that they're being stockpiled is in many cases that waste is unsuitable to be taken off island via air freight, or it doesn't fit within our budgetary constraints for the year. Our composter, our hot rod composter at the Waste Management Centre is now back up and running, fully operational. We've managed to work through a glut of material that we were doing on behalf of the Department of Infrastructure, and now managing standard green waste and other organic waste, and so we'll be putting out a media release to the community very shortly to make them aware of that and to come into waste management to see when they may be able to acquire some from us. There's likely to be quite a wait list for that because there has been a lot of questions. With regards to the Argentine ant eradication program, really the point of note there is that the program for treatment, which was originally planned for September this year, has been pushed back, and now that will be commenced very shortly, or planned to be commenced, I should say, in the coming couple of weeks, which is exciting. There was just a couple of hold-ups with permits or regulatory permits for the use of the both sugar bait and hydrogel, which is what is used for aerial baiting. And with regards to our environment program, we've had a number of activities rolling through for the month, which have been great. But probably two of note was the community tree planting at Cascade Reserve at Cockpit Creek, which occurred on the 26th of September, and I understand we had around 40 to 50 community members there, which was a great turnout. And we also had a visiting school group from Matthew Flinders on the mainland, who assisted with some planting around some new facilities at Puppy's Point, which is in Selwyn Reserve. And probably just the last thing I'd note, Mr. Interim Administrator, is that the coming Monday is the A&H show, the annual A&H show for Norfolk Island, and as part of that, Council have partnered with the Invasive Species Council to develop a series of vegetation mapping for the island, which is the first time it's been done. It's a very exciting project that's been happening over a couple of years now, and with the assistance of a couple of technical specialists, including a Norfolk Islander, Naomi Christian, who has an ecological background, that completed some mapping, and we'll be presenting that to the community. There'll be a release of that to the community as part of the A&H show. So we're all very much looking forward to that, giving people a sense of what a vegetation looked like pre-arrival by Europeans, and also what it looks like now, and giving information to community members on how they may wish to plant out native species on their properties, or for that matter, public land for council. So that's our update report for September. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Your report is always thorough and informative, and I appreciate the information there. I'm impressed, certainly, with the number of people that turned out for the tree planting. That's, you know, by mainland standards, that'll be a big turnout. So, you know, with the small population you have, that's an excellent outcome. I resolve that Council notes the information provided in the report, and I'll move to item 14.1, which is the COVID relief business grant. Mr. General Manager.
This is a great news story, Mr. Interim Administrator. Just letting you know that Council took on this task on behalf of the department because it would have taken a long period of time for a federal grant program to be put in place, but we managed to put this in place within weeks. And to date, when this report was written, there was 49 local businesses that received $585,000 worth of funding. I can tell you, since this report's been written, that figure's now closer to $700,000 that we've provided to local business community. So that was a significant help during a really difficult time when the planes stopped coming from New South Wales. So there's a little bit of money left over in the account. We originally received just over $1 million, but today, as I said, this report, when it was written, says 585, but it's closer to 700 now.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. It's great to see the collaboration between the community and council, and then between council and the Commonwealth, could be put together so quickly to provide the urgent relief that was required in these circumstances. So my congratulations to all involved at council in being able to put that together so quickly to make it work, and now to have money out in the hands of local businesses. Very well done. So I resolve that council notes the distribution of the COVID relief business grant funds. And I'll move to item 15, notices of motion. I note there are no notices of motion. Item 16, urgent business without notice. Mr. General Manager, any urgent business?
None this month, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Thank you. That takes us to item 17. And item 17.1 is described as a confidential matter for Council's consideration. I'm intending to deal with this in open council. Mr. General Manager, do you have any comment on that?
No, I'm supportive of that action, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Thank you. So I wonder if you could just, because people may not be aware of the detail of what's in the report here, because it was published as a confidential item, whether you could just give a description of what is being proposed, please, for the record, and so that our community can be brought into this.
I will, by passing to Manager Planning and Environment, to give you an update on the process that we are putting for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager, Mr. Interim Administrator. So, Mr. Interim Administrator, before you is a paper regarding an agreement for service by Yamaha, Yamaha Motor Australia, and it's with regards to the aerial baiting for the Argentine ant eradication program. So, by way of background, as you would know, Council delivers a service for Argentine ant eradication as part of the service delivery agreement with the Commonwealth. To date, the aerial component of that service has actually been delivered mostly by the Commonwealth through an agreement between Yamaha and the Department of Infrastructure, between Yamaha and the Commonwealth themselves. As part of arrangements for Council to take over the entirety of the service, both including ground baiting and aerial baiting, and for Council to take more, I guess, the management accountability of that service, while CSIRO being an additional party to this, to the eradication program, steps back and provides more advisory services as opposed to direction. We as Council wish to, I guess, have the agreement that had previously been between Yamaha and the Commonwealth with Council. So that agreement means that Council can exercise full control over the activities that Yamaha conduct here on island to do aerial baiting, and that aerial baiting is a critical component of the eradication program. There's a number of areas around the island that simply cannot be accessed or treated at ground level, and so it's very important on that basis. But we also felt that if with Council exercising full control over that program as part of the SDA, that it was prudent to have that agreement in Council's name, as opposed to the Commonwealth, which the Commonwealth are in agreement with. So the contract is for the use of a drone, and that drone delivers a payload of up to 30 kilos of bait each time, and the work that it does is it's very, very unique. It's the type of work that certainly no other company can deliver, both in Australia and New Zealand. And we have a letter from CSIRO, who again is, as I mentioned, a party to the overall activities, supporting that fact that this is the only company that can deliver those types of services in our jurisdiction, in our area. So the contract is for an estimated value to do those services of around $300,000 for a 12-month term, and so the contract is intended to be for initially a 12-month period, which is the period of secured funding to conduct the Argentine eradication program with provided by the Commonwealth, the funding provided by the Commonwealth, with an option to extend out to 2024 year by year beyond that, based on further funding from the Commonwealth. We Further to that, we seek council's agreement that we may enter into this agreement. We understand that there are tender considerations as part of the Local Government Act that would normally apply to circumstances such as this for any procurement above $150,000. So there's exceeding that amount, but we would wish to exercise the provisions under the Act to sole source this based on the fact that we, based on independent advice, know that this is the only company that can provide this service, not just on Norfolk Island, but in our overall jurisdiction in Australia and New Zealand.
Thank you. I accept all of the advice that's contained in the report, with the exception that the matter needed to be dealt with in accordance with section 10A2 of the Local Government Act, which provides for dealing with matters in closed session of council, and that's why I've asked that we deal with this in open session, and I will deal with that in the resolution that I'm about to make. So in relation to this matter, council resolves, one, that this matter be dealt with in open council, as it's outside the ambit of section 10A2 of the Local Government Act as applied. Two, that council considers that a satisfactory result, I'll go slowly with this so you can take this for the minute, the council considers that a satisfactory result would not be achieved by inviting tenders due to the lack of alternate providers of the service in this isolated region. And three, as printed, to agree to the contract with Yamaha to deliver the aerial base component of the Argentine ant eradication program for a term ending until 30 June 2022, with the potential to extend to 30 June 2024 pending commitment of funds from the Commonwealth. And did we get that for the minutes?
Yeah, and it's recorded, so we'll have that.
Okay, fine. So resolved, which brings us to the end of the meeting. Mr. General Manager, is there any further business?
No, there's not.
Then I will close the meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 3:20 p.m. and I thank everybody for their attendance.